So, have you ever stopped and wondered how one single era in one country could produce the greatest playwrights the world has ever seen? We're talking about Elizabethan England, of course, Shakespeare's time. And here's the thing, it wasn't a happy accident. It was a perfect storm of politics, language, and just raw ambition. Let's dig in and unpack the unique ingredients that came together to create this absolute golden age of drama.
Right, this is the big question, isn't it? Because it wasn't just Shakespeare. You had this whole generation of incredible writers like Christopher Marlowe and Tobble's Kyde. What was in the water? What was it about this specific moment that allowed for such a massive artistic explosion?
To figure this out, we're going to look at 5 key ingredients that really set the stage. First, we'll start with the political climate. Then, we'll talk about a new obsession with the English language. We'll introduce the two giants of the era, check out the incredible theaters they built, and finally, see how they turned the whole thing into a business. Okay, first things first, politics. Before you can have great art, you need at least a little bit of stability. And for decades, England had the exact opposite. The whole country was basically being torn apart by religious conflict, which is a terrible climate for something like public theater to really take root. Just look at this timeline. It's a total roller coaster. You've got Henry VIII breaking from the Catholic Church just so he can get a divorce. Then his son Edward keeps things Protestant, but then his daughter Mary, Bloody Mary, drags the country kicking and screaming back to Catholicism. It was pure chaos until Queen Elizabeth I finally took the throne. Her long 45-year reign settled things down, united the country as Protestant, and created this powerful new sense of national pride. And this is the year that really sealed the deal. In 1588, England pulled off a stunning victory against the Spanish Armada, the massive navy of Catholic Spain. This was huge. It cemented England's identity as a confident, independent Protestant nation. And with that confidence came this incredible cultural flowering. So with all this new national pride, England needed a voice. The country became absolutely obsessed with the power and the potential of its own language. And this wasn't just some academic thing. It created a real public hunger for entertainment that used English in new, bold, and poetic ways. And you could see this fascination with language popping up in a few places. You had short plays called interludes performed for nobles, and school dramas written in English instead of the usual Latin. But the real game changers? They were the university wits. This was a group of smart, university-educated writers, guys like Christopher Marlowe, who looked around and thought, hey, we can actually make a living writing for the public. And just like that, they became England's first real professional playwrights.
And that, of course, brings us to the two men who had come to define the entire era. Christopher Marlowe, the trailblazer, and William Shakespeare, the guy who perfected the art form. Honestly, you can't tell the story of one without talking about the other.
Marlowe's big innovation was something called the mighty line, what we now call iambic pentameter. The best way to think about it is like a heartbeat. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. 5 beats in every line. This powerful poetic rhythm had never really been heard on the English stage before. He basically gave the era its signature sound.
Marlowe was the brilliant, fiery innovator. He was Cambridge-educated, maybe worked as a government spy. He lived this fast, dangerous life that got cut short in a mysterious tavern brawl. Shakespeare, on the other hand, was the ultimate theater professional. He wasn't just a writer. He was an actor, a manager, and a shareholder in his company. He took the explosive forms that Marlowe pioneered and just perfected them, filling them with an unbelievable understanding of the human heart. And this quote right here, it gets to the core of what made Shakespeare so different. Other playwrights created cool characters, for sure, but Shakespeare created people. He turned, as it says here, stage figures into living individuals. His incredible insight into human psychology, our ambition, our flaws, our capacity for love and cruelty, that's the reason his work is still so powerful, even 400 years later. All right, so we've got a stable country, a new love for the English language, and a couple of brilliant writers. But they needed a place to perform, right? The actual physical theaters themselves were the next crucial piece of this whole puzzle. So there were basically 2 main types of theaters. You had the public theaters, like the famous Globe, which were these huge, open-air venues that could pack in up to 3,000 people from every social class. Then you had private theaters, which were smaller, indoor, candlelit spaces for a wealthier crowd. Shakespeare's company was smart. They eventually operated in both, which gave them maximum reach. Let's just quickly break down a place like the Globe so you can picture it. Down on the ground, you had the standing area. the yard, for the lower class folks they called groundlings. Then you had 3 tiers of covered seating, the galleries, for those who could afford a bench. The huge stage jutted right out into the audience, with a 3-story building called the Tiring House behind it for costumes and props, and a painted roof above it called the Heavens. It was an incredibly dynamic and intimate setup. So for our last piece, you have to understand this wasn't just an artistic movement. It was the birth of show business. To keep this incredible level of creativity going, they needed a professional, commercial structure to make it all work.
And here's a wild detail about that business. There were no actresses, 0. All of those iconic female roles you know. Juliet, Cleopatra, Lady Macbeth. Every single one was played by a highly trained apprentice boy. It's a convention that's kind of hard for us to imagine today, but it completely shaped how these plays were written and performed.
These acting companies were set up just like modern businesses, with a really clear hierarchy. At the very top, you had the shareholders, guys like Shakespeare, who invested in the company and shared in the profits. Below them were the hirelings, who were basically salaried actors brought in for smaller roles. And at the bottom were the apprentices, the young boys who were learning the trade and, of course, playing all the female parts. And the pace was just relentless. Every play had to be approved by a government censor. The companies all needed a noble patron to give them legal protection. They used almost no scenery, so they relied on the playwright's words, what we call spoken decor, to paint a picture for the audience. Rehearsal time was super short, and the shows themselves were these fast-paced, 2 to 3 hour marathons with no intermission. This was a well-oiled machine built for constant, non-stop production. So, there you have it. A stable nation, a deep love of language, artistic geniuses, purpose-built venues, and a professional business model. That right there was the perfect storm that gave us Shakespeare. All of it came together in one place at one time to create something truly timeless. Which, leaves us with one final thought. What's the perfect storm of today? What combination of culture, technology, and politics is creating the defining storytellers of our own generation?